flunking out in 6th grade. Of course, it was the teacher's fault. You know why? Because she wrote too small on the chalkboard. It couldn't have been my fault. I was writing there on the chalkboard. She was writing on the chalkboard, and I would try to copy down what she was writing. And sometimes I got it right. Most of the time I got it wrong. One of my classmates said to me, "Dave, you know what? I think you've got a problem. It's not the teacher's problem. I think that you are nearsighted and you need to go see the eye doctor." Well, just to prove her wrong, I went to the eye doctor. And some of you have been to the eye doctor. You can relate to this experience. You sit down there, and I heard this big, booming voice. And he said, "What do you see on the chart?" And my answer was, "What chart?" And then he put this sci-fi machine in front of my face, this big, they called it a phoropter. And you remember those big things in the old days? It was just like this giant, big, black machine with knobs on it, and he sticks in front of your face, and he's playing with levers, and they go clink, clank, clunk. And then he says, "Is it better? Clink or worse?" Clink. Better? Clink or worse? Clink A, clink B. Finally I said B, okay? And then it's not all over, because then he goes clink A, clink B. Well, B's a little better, so I say B. Clink, and then another clink, A, clink, B. And we went through this for seemed like forever, and then finally it got to the point where I was totally overwhelmed, and I said, "I can't see any difference between clink A and clink B." And he said, "Good, we're done." 2 weeks later, he came back and was fitted with my wonderful eyeglasses, and I even dug out a picture someplace. There they are. What do you think? Aren't those cool? And so I'm sitting there, and the eye doctor puts the glasses over my face, and I remember like it was yesterday, there was this huge, ginormous nose right in front of me. The biggest nose I've ever seen before since, the nose of the eye doctor. And then behind the nose, a face like pizza. There was zits all over it. Who would have known? I mean, I never knew before. I had an eye doctor with a big nose and zits for a face. And then I looked beyond the zits to the window that was in back of the eye doctor, and I saw something that I'd never seen before in my life. Trees. But not just regular trees. These trees had leaves on them. Now, I knew that trees had leaves, duh, but I didn't know that you could actually see the leaves, from like 20 feet away or 30 feet away. And that day, my life was changed forever because I could see. Today, we're going to talk about 3 stories, all about vision. The first story is a story about healing from blindness. And the second story, healing from spiritual blindness. And the third story, well, that's your story. And we'll see if we can weave all these stories together today. The story begins, and I got to get my glasses out. Mark chapter 8, and if you have your Bible today, this is actually our key chapter. Got your iPad, your iPhone, your smartphone, just open it up because we're going to be hanging out in this text for the next 30 minutes or so. Mark chapter 8, verse 22. When they arrived at Bethsaida, some people brought a blind man to Jesus, and they begged him to touch the man and heal him. Jesus took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village, and then, spitting on the man's eyes, he laid his hands on him and asked, "Can you see anything now?" The man looked around. "Yes," he said. "I see people, but I can't see them very clearly. They look like trees walking around." And verse 25, then Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes again, and his eyes were opened. His sight was completely restored, and he could see everything clearly. This story, I believe, is just a story that Mark uses to set up the greater story of the rest of Mark chapter 8. So there's 3 parts. Find a partner here this morning because we're going to do some partner stuff. Find a partner, look that partner in the eye, and repeat after me, I am blind. Ready, go. I am blind. And now say, I can see partially. And now say, I can see clearly. And that's our outline for our message today. Let's go back now where the story begins. And the story actually is the story of physical blindness, yes, but it's a greater story than that. It's a story of spiritual blindness. It's the story of Peter, and it's your story, and it's my story. This story actually begins not in Mark, but it goes all the way back to the very beginning, Matthew chapter 4:18. So let's just duck in there for a minute before we go back to Mark chapter 8. Matthew chapter 4, verse 18. One day as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew, throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Here's Peter, spiritually nearsighted. Peter is a fisherman. Peter is living in the moment. Peter, you have to as a fisherman. I mean, this is back before the days of refrigerators. You go out there and catch a fish, and then you got to quickly row back to the village and sell the fish, and they got to cook it for supper and eat it that night because, well, it's no good for later. And then you go back and repeat it all again the next day, and the next day, and the next day. Peter was just focused right now on the moment. Has life changed any over the last couple thousand years? You think with technology now it would be a little bit different, but I believe technology has made us focus even more in the moment. Hungry? In 60 seconds, you can have hot food delivered to your window of your car. Are you tired? You can get a 5-hour energy drink, just like that. Depressed? You can go shopping. Hurting? You can swallow a pill. Instant success, instant gratification, living in the moment. It's all around us. And yet I believe that perhaps maybe in this instant gratification, we are just kind of wandering aimlessly with no destination. Just day after day after day. I wonder if Peter, maybe sometime out in the lake, I imagine him thinking, is this all there is to life? Maybe he's out there in the lake and he sees the mountains beside the Sea of Galilee and he wonders to himself, what's beyond those mountains? Is there anything more to life? Or am I just going to be a fisherman like my father was a fisherman before me, and my grandfather was a fisherman before, and my great-grandfather, and on and on and on? Is there more to life? And as he looks around, he sees that things are changing in his little town because the Roman Empire is gradually beginning to strangle the Jewish people. And he wonders, what about the tyranny of Rome? Is there anybody that has the power to overthrow the Romans? And as a fisherman, though, what can I do about it? And he's stuck. He's stuck in the present. Stuck in the moment. Stuck like maybe some of us are stuck. Spinning in the moment. Moving really fast but not going anywhere. Are we stuck? Anybody stuck here in a career that seems to be a dead-end career? It's not going anyplace. Stuck in a dead-end relationship that just never seemed to be able to crack the surface into intimacy. Stuck in school, maybe not able to get to that place where you'd like to go. Stuck emotionally. Maybe there's some things in your life that just seem to come up again and again and again and again, and no matter how hard you try to get past it, it's just in your face. Stuck physically. You made that New Year's resolution and, well, stuck spiritually. Never quite able to get on to that greater depth of spiritual intimacy. I think Peter was stuck. And here's where we get back into the story. Matthew chapter 4, verse 19, when Jesus begins to offer Peter vision. Matthew chapter 4, verse 19. Jesus called out to them, "Come, follow me. I will show you how to fish for people." And they left their nets at once and followed him. Jesus is offering Peter a set of glasses. Glasses that look beyond just the present, but look into the future. Future destination. What is that future destination? Now, let's go ahead to our key passage, Mark chapter 8, and see what this vision is that he's given to Peter. Mark chapter 8, verse 27, and we're going to see very clearly what Peter's vision is. Mark chapter 8, verse 27. Jesus and his disciples left Galilee and went up to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. As they were walking along, he asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" And verse 28, "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say you are one of the other prophets." And then in verse 29, then he asked them, "But who do you say I am?" And Peter replied, "You are the Messiah," or the Christ, as other translations put it. Stop for a moment and think what Peter's picture of the Messiah was, because just erase some of the couple thousand years that have gone since then. What is Peter's picture of the Messiah? I believe Peter's picture of the Messiah is the national Messiah. And Jesus will be that person that will overthrow Rome. And as Peter begins to connect the moments one by one, to leverage them towards the possibility of that destination of overthrowing Rome, things begin to get together, and he gets excited about it. He sacrifices, but in each one of those sacrifices, things begin to happen. And he looks and he envisions a new future, a preferred future, a future where Jesus is going to be overthrowing the Roman tyranny, and Peter's going to be a part of that, and Peter is going to do good. And perhaps by doing good, he can do well. Perhaps he can find a place in the cabinet of the new emperor. Perhaps he can have a prosperous and long life. Perhaps he can live in luxury with servants. And he begins to think of that preferred future following Jesus, the Messiah. And it's good to be able to connect current moments with the future. It's something that we need to do. Are you able to do that, or are we stuck in the moment? Let me just take for a moment. Let me be an optometrist today, and we're going to bring a spiritual phoropter into the room today, and you're going to help me out with this prescription. Are you ready? Put the phoropter, whatever, the big sci-fi machine on your face right now, and help me out. We're going to do a little vision test, and I'm going to pull some levers, and you tell me what you see. First of all, clink, hungry, or clink, full. What is your preferred future? Full, absolutely. Now, to get full, though, you have to buy groceries, and to get groceries, you need clink, money, or clink, no money. Money, all right? Now, to have money, you need clink, job, or clink, no job. Which? No job. Okay, you're with me on it? Okay. Now, to get a job, you need clink, education, or clink, no education. Education. And to get a good education, you need to clink, watch video games, or clink, study hard. Study hard, I hope. And then once you finish that education, you got to get a job. And to be able to get a job, you have to clink, hang out by yourself, or clink, network with people. Network with people. And for that job, you have to get a car, and you need transportation, so you have to save up. So clink, double tall cappuccino, or clink, save $5. And to be active at that job and to be healthy, you need to clink, go to bed early, or clink, stay up all night with Facebook. And to be healthy, the next morning, clink, you got to go up and go jogging, or clink, sleep in. Which is it? Sleep in. And you want that job of your dreams, but you have a job that's going no place, so what do? Clink, do you work hard? Or clink, just get by? And then, of course, you get to a certain age, but you got to realize, hey, someday I'm going to be old, and I need to prepare for the future, so clink, save for retirement, or clink, go on a cruise. It's a tough one. But you see how every moment, if we have a preferred future in our mind, things begin to come together. And they began to come together for Peter, and things start taking off. Instead of this ragtag band of Jesus' followers, a few now it grows to 12 and to 70 and 1,000. And some people think maybe 10,000 or 20,000. This was a mass movement. Rome was even paying attention now, as Jesus had this potential of throwing out Rome in Israel. And at the peak here, where everything is starting to come together, something amazing happens. And Peter is blinded by supernatural clarity. Say to your partner, I can see clearly. Mark chapter 8, verse 31. Then Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but 3 days later he would rise from the dead, as he talked about this openly with his disciples. Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. It's a nice word, reprimand. I don't know what the words are that Peter spoke that day, but I think that this was more than just a reprimand. I think this was an all-out verbal fight. And as Peter is talking to Jesus, he says, Jesus, what is going on here? I gave up fishing where I actually had something to eat to follow you, and now you tell me that you're not going to be the leader of the Jewish people? Jesus, I have given up my home. I have given up sleep. I have given up all. I have stopped eating. I have walked with you for days and days and months, hoping that someday I would be able to live with you in the palace as king, and now you tell me you're not going to be king? And then Jesus goes off on Peter. We do have the words of Jesus. Mark chapter 8, verse 33. Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples, and then there's that nice word, reprimanded. Reprimanded Peter, get away from me, Satan. Satan. Name calling. What would you do if you were the other disciples and watching this stuff go on, man? Jesus and Peter going at it. Wow! Satan. Why in the world did Jesus call Peter Satan? I believe the answer is found in the very next verse, or the very next sentence. You, Peter, are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's. You are what? Seeing things merely from a human point of view and not from God. Why was Peter like Satan? Because Satan experienced a little ADHD. Satan was interested in winning the battle, but lost sight of the bigger picture of the war. Focused on those things that were near and close, ignoring the bigger picture. And if you think Satan has ADHD, what about us? I mean, we're just living in the moment, and we can't think of the future. Peter's thinking of the here and now, and he has lost total sight of the future. You getting the picture? You getting the picture, Peter? You putting those lenses on? Are you able to see the future? Let me give you just one more metaphor. And then he comes out with this outrageous metaphor. Mark chapter 8, verse 34. Calling the crowd to join his disciples, he said, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross, and follow me." You heard those words before? Take up your cross? Maybe there's some songs about it. Take up your cross and follow Jesus. Take up your cross. You know, we have so used that phrase through the years that has become a cliche. That was not a cliche in Peter's time. As they were there in Philippi, Caesarea, as they were having this fight, I imagine they're walking right in the road before them was one, maybe two, maybe a half a dozen people carrying a cross beam of a cross, pressing down on their shoulders. Crucifixions were so common in Rome that some people say that there were miles you could go on a road without seeing any space without someone being crucified. It was the very way that Rome was bearing down on the Jewish people. And I imagine right there before them, someone is walking along carrying a crossbeam of a cross. What's the symbology of the crossbeam of the cross? You know that once you start carrying that crossbeam, how long is your life going to last? You are headed for execution. And Jesus says, you have to take up the cross. What does that mean, to take up the cross? It means that you are destined to die. Your life is temporary. You are not going to live forever. Take up your cross. Get used to it. Get used to the idea. And as that cross presses down on you, you'll be confronted with the reality of the possibility that you may not be around forever. The next verse. Verse 35. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but love your own soul? Jesus is offering spiritual lenses for Peter. The lens of the cross. Jesus is taking Peter to the spiritual optometrist and say, hey, let's dial in a prescription here for you. You ready, Peter? Come on up here. We're going to put you before the phoropter. Help us out here. And clink, Peter. National Messiah or clink, cosmic Messiah? Which is it? Cosmic Messiah. Clink, overthrow the tyranny of Rome, or clink, overthrow the tyranny of sin. Or clink, earthly kingdom, or clink, heavenly kingdom. Clink, power, or clink, humility. Clink, earthly fame and fortune, or clink, heavenly recognition. Clink, good, or clink, great. How do we look at life? Do we look at heaven through earthly lenses? Or do we look at earth through heavenly lenses? There was a man who looked at heaven through earthly lenses. He loved money. I mean, he was good at that money, and he collected quite a bit. And he told his wife, you know, I love money. In fact, I want you to do a favor for me. If I go before you do, I want you to take all my money and I want you to bury it with me. So a dutiful wife, and she says, okay, yep, we'll do that for you. Sure enough, he croaked. And at the funeral, Here's the casket, open casket, and someone had heard about this story, so you're not going to really do it, are you? He says to the wife, and she's holding a shoebox in her lap. And says, yeah, I made a promise. And so sure enough, she gets up, she takes the shoebox and drops it in the casket and closes the lid. Sits back down again. Her friend says to her, what is going on here? What did you just do? And she said, well, I promised him, and so that's exactly what I did. I collected all of his money, every little penny, every big penny dollar, and I put it all in a checking account, and I wrote him a check. How do you look at life? Do you look at heaven through earthly lenses? Or do you look at earth through heavenly lenses? Is eternity your prescription, or is the earth your prescription? That's tough. Because when Jesus comes to us with spiritual prescription, we have to take off the old pair of glasses and put on a new pair. You can't wear two pair of glasses at the same time. It doesn't work very well. Spiritual prescription. The spiritual prescription is the crossbeam. Take up your cross. Take up your cross. That means that you know when that cross is pressing down on your shoulder that your life is temporary, and you begin to view life through heavenly lenses. And you begin to be able to live deeply, and to live fully, and to love liberally, and to love recklessly, knowing that it doesn't matter if someone loves you back. You may not have time. This may be your last chance that you have with that person. Now we love in this culture. Some of us bought our love of our life a heart-shaped box with chocolates in it this week. And that's good. But Jesus is talking about something greater, and that is loving recklessly. Sometimes we get that opportunity to see life through spiritual lenses, and the cross is thrust upon us. Some of us in this room have been there, and it happens like this. The doctor comes to you and says, you have a terminal disease. You're going to die. Or when a loved one that we were very close to disappears in death. Or when we have a near-death experience, that cross is thrust upon us, and suddenly it dawns on us, wow, we have 20/20 vision. Life is important. I may only have a few days or a few hours to live, and suddenly everything gets in perspective, and we're able to live liberally and recklessly and wildly. And then it fades as life goes on. Because love is hard. Love is difficult. Love is complex. Love is messy. It's dirty. It's complicated. And most of the time, we're never loved back. How can we do it? How can we live in that lens of eternity? This is only part of the story. Because as that cross presses down on our shoulder, it reminds us of something else. It reminds us of the love that God poured out recklessly and lavishly and deeply through Jesus Christ at Calvary. And as we feel that cross pressing down on us, it reminds us that we are loved. And because we are loved, we can love. And we can love deeply and recklessly and wildly and lavishly. Have you taken up your cross? Have you lived in that moment? Do you have spiritual lenses? Are you looking at earth through heavenly eyes? Vision allows us to make decisions in the moment will last for eternity. A couple weeks ago, I was in Florida, and I had some decisions to make. Clink, 75 degrees, Florida. Clink, 30 degrees, Maryland. But Eileen was in Maryland. So I chose the better choice, and I began to head for the airport in an unnamed rental car. And as I drove this rental car towards Tampa, towards the airport there in Tampa, driving along, I missed the turnoff towards Tampa, and I headed for St. Pete. Now, if any of you know Florida, when you're headed for St. Pete, there are no exit ramps. You go over the ocean for miles and miles and miles and miles. And clink, stay in Florida. Clink, turn around and head for Maryland. So I got to St. Pete, and I turned around and I headed for Maryland, and just then the heavens opened. And this was not a glorious experience. This was a rainy experience. And so I'm heading for this rental car company, got lost again. Finally, I made it to the unnamed rental car company that I will never, ever rent car from again. Because when I got there was no place to wait for the shuttle bus. And it is raining cats and dogs. And so I'm sitting there in the car looking for a place to stand, and clink, go back to the hotel. Or clink, stand out in the rain for who knows how long. And go home and see Eileen. Well, I stood there in the rain because this unnamed rental car company had only one shuttle bus, and they were a long ways from the airport, and the shuttle bus had just left. And so I think it was probably 45 minutes standing in the rain. And then, finally, it shows up. I go off to the airport, and I have the misfortune, some of you that are travelers, you know what this is all about. I had the misfortune of choosing the X-ray line, not the metal detector line. And so, you've all been here. You stand like this, and you walk a few feet, and there at that point, you stop, and then they wave you on. Clink. You have a choice, the man said. You can go home, back to your hotel, or clink. And he pulls out rubber gloves. You can have a hand inspection in front of everybody. Oh, that was a little tougher decision to make. But I thought of home, and I thought of Eileen, and I said, I will do it. And I thought I detected a smile on his face as he pulls out his gloves, and he began searching every part of my body, and I do mean every part of my body. And then he says, do you know why I'm doing this? Clink. Because you are a pervert. Or clink. I don't know, you tell me. And so I listened as he told me. He says, you know, as you went through the X-ray machine, we discovered that your body is very wet under your clothes. And we know that terrorists are very likely to be sweaty before they go blow up airplanes. I said, sir, I have been standing in the rain for the last 45 minutes. He says, I know, but I just got to do my job. Finally, he's done. I'm going to the gate, and now it's like a couple hours have passed, and I'm going out to the gate and not expecting to see the airplane because it's long gone. And I get out to the gate, and guess what I see? No airplane. Clink. Go home to the hotel. 75-degree weather. Clink. Try to figure out how to get another airplane. So I'm walking around desperately around the gate area, and then the gate attendant probably saw my distress and says, you're waiting for flight, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I said, yes. And she said, well, that plane has not arrived yet. Something about a thunderstorm. You know anything about that? I said, yes. And the plane arrived, and I was able to go home safely to see my wife. Because it was my vision of home that kept me focused in every moment of that experience. Where is your vision today? Are you seeing heaven through earthly eyes or earth through heavenly eyes? Have you taken up your cross? If it is your desire just for this day, and I'm not talking about tomorrow, but just for this day, for this moment, to look through heavenly eyes, I want to invite you to stand to your feet right now. If that's your desire, stand to your feet. Say, Lord, I want you to give me that spiritual prescription so that I can see through heavenly eyes. I'm serious about this. Don't stand up just because everybody else is standing out, because I'm going to tell you something next that you may not like. Because we are going to experience living in the moment of eternity right now. I want you to find your partner that you've been talking to. Look to your partner, face to face, eyeball to eyeball. Find a partner, eyeball to eyeball. It may be someone that you know well. It may be someone that you've never seen before in your life. It may be someone old. It may be someone young. It may be someone that doesn't speak your language, but look them in the eye. Come on, eyeball, eyeball. Look at them, eyeball, eyeball. Look at that person in the eye. Do you realize this may be the only opportunity that you'll ever see this person again in the rest of your life? And this person represents the next person that you're going to see, and the next person, and the next person throughout this day. Look that person in the eyes. Whether you know them or not, tell them, I love you. Ready? Go. I love you. And now it may be on your comfort zone, whether you like it or not. Give them a hug. Give them a hug. And be seated. Let's pray. God, we thank you for the lens of eternity. May we take up our cross. May we follow you. May we feel the love of heaven pushing down on our shoulders, liberating us to love people unconditionally, just as you loved us unconditionally. This day, I pray in Jesus' name.